Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates post-game live. Hope you're all having a good weekend or had a good weekend, depending on where you may be. Feels like a few days here since I've done a post-game live or a podcast episode. Of course, the last one was after Tuesday's game against the Miami Heat, which was very disappointing. Didn't do one, was busy on Friday in the win over the Pelicans, which was a solid enough win, but very unspectacular. The Warriors started slowly in that game, got back into it, had a good fourth quarter to close it out there. But this game today against the Spurs, a 148-106 victory at Frostbank Center. Far better, no doubt about that. A near perfect game from the Warriors, you would suggest. I think really the only negative to come out of it is the re-aggravation, it seems, of the ankle injury for Jonathan Kuminga after a hard fall in the second quarter. So that's disappointing. Sounds like he's going to be reevaluated on Monday, which is tomorrow, obviously. So he'll be evaluated then, and we'll wait and see what his status is like for Tuesday's game against the Memphis Grizzlies, which all of a sudden becomes, I think, easily the biggest matchup of the Warriors season to date. I think there's no doubt about that. They'll probably have more important matchups, obviously, over the past. What have we got? 8 games remaining now, whatever it is. So that is going to be a huge one because the Warriors will actually have the opportunity to surpass the Grizzlies in the standings. They are currently a win and a loss down or ahead of the Warriors. But obviously, the Warriors beat the Grizzlies. That's an extra win in their column, and then an extra loss in the Grizzlies column, which means the two teams would be tied. And I think the Warriors would also have the season tiebreak if they're to win that game on Tuesday. So that's a huge one. And I've already got one eye kind of toward that because I don't think there's too much to be necessarily taken out of this game against the Spurs, who were pretty disappointing from the opening tip. You could kind of understand they were coming, on the second night of a back-to-back that, lost to the Celtics the night before and, had a reasonable, performance against the Celtics, kept them to within, 121, 111 at the end, fought pretty hard there. So this, for a young team, obviously missing their best two players with Wemby and De'Aaron Fox, it felt like a little bit of a letdown. You could kind of tell that early. They were pretty sloppy offensively, and the amount of easy looks the Warriors were getting at the rim, I just think the Spurs didn't bring the requisite intensity on either side of the ball. But it was good to see Golden State take advantage and to be able to put up 148 points, regardless of the opposition. I think that's a huge, and fantastic thing to see after some real offensive issues in recent games. Obviously, the performance against the Heat going back to Tuesday, where they only put up 86 points, is one of their worst offensive games of the season. Arguably was their worst. And then Friday against the Pelicans, yes, they won the game by 16, but I think they shot less than, about 43% from the floor, less than 24% from three-point range. So it still wasn't a great offensive performance by any means. But again, this is an NBA game. Yes, the opposition isn't great, but you've still got to be able to put the ball in the basket and to be able to get in 21 threes, get 148 points. Brandin Podziemski was the main factor in that with a career-high 7 threes, was 2 off his scoring career high with 27. He was massive and, it was really an all-round display. It's kind of what happens in dominant blowout wins. Really important, I think, that no player played more than basically 27 minutes in this game, which could prove pivotal given the upcoming 4 games the Warriors do have, starting with the Grizzlies on Tuesday. So to be able to rest Steph and Jimmy and Draymond, I mean, those guys Draymond played 21. I think Jimmy and Steph played like 24, 25. They really didn't have to do a whole lot. Like, they played well, but, Steph and Jimmy only took a combined 15 shots in this game. The Warriors had 8 players score at least 8 points. So everyone got fed a little bit, and it was beautiful to see. So cannot wait now for the game on Tuesday against the Grizzlies, because they are now gettable, and the Warriors could push up to 5th in the Western Conference standings. And, we know what's been happening with them in terms of firing Taylor Jenkins, some real upheaval and stuff going on. So a good result for the Warriors today, not only in regards to their win, but also the LA Clippers obviously losing to the Cleveland Cavaliers, which means the Warriors push back up to 6th in the Western Conference standings. The Clippers are now down to 8th. A little bit disappointed that the Timberwolves just beat Detroit after the Pistons had an early double-digit advantage. And then we saw that massive brawl where 7 players were ejected. That was kind of crazy scenes there. But I know the Pistons, Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, they're certainly trying to bring back the bad boy Pistons. There's no doubt about that. And they're playing with an edge, and it's been working for them this season, given how much improved they have been and look like they are a bona fide playoff team now. So a little bit disappointed they couldn't get the win over Minnesota, but I think that was always pretty unlikely given they were without Cade Cunningham. So the Warriors up to 6 and now face the Grizzlies on Tuesday for a chance to push up even further. Of course, they lose that game and they could find themselves back down in 8th. Like, this is kind of what we have now in such the tightly packed Western Conference standings, that the Warriors can still basically finish anywhere between 5th and 8th here with 8 games remaining in the regular season. Just to answer your comments here, Gamer F2P says Looney hit a 3 and he had a bit of a laugh about it. Yeah, that was wild. We even saw Trace in like the final possession of the game. Trace took a corner 3 and might have hurt the percentages a little bit at the end there, but it was great to see. That was Loon's first 3 of the season. And that's kind of how things were rolling for the Warriors. It was like everyone was making threes. Obviously started with Pods. Not only Pods, good to see Moses. Like, Moses has struggled offensively quite a bit recently over, a little bit more of a stretch than just what the team has, I think. The last few weeks have been a little bit more difficult for Moses. Obviously, he's broken out into this bona fide starter, and I don't think that's necessarily going to change. But, his shooting performances were concerning, particularly given we're coming toward the end of the regular season and all these games that we really need to win, and obviously then entering the playoffs, hopefully. So that was becoming, a concern of sorts, but good to see him bounce back. 20 points, second behind Pods. I think he was 7 of 11 shooting from the floor, 3 of 6 from distance. So good to see him hit a few shots. And this is really what it was. Like, it was a confidence builder. The game basically from after the first 5 minutes, the result of the game was never really in question. The Warriors dominated from the opening tip. It was just about, can we find some confidence for some of these guys, particularly the young guys, Pods, Moses. I think that's really important heading into this final stretch of the season. Gamer FTP says Celtics and Cavs struggled to beat Spurs. We're looking good. Great rest for the starters too. Yeah, I agree with the Spurs have been, obviously they've been without Wemby and Fox, but they have been dangerous recently. Like, I think they're 8-13 or now 8-14 after the All-Star break. And good, but it's also not horrific. And as you say, like, they did battle hard against, a couple of the best teams in the East, or a couple of the best teams in the league in general. So this was like a semi-dangerous game, but I also went into it thinking, okay, if we can just come with enough energy, intensity, and that's what I've been disappointed with against lesser opposition in recent times, is that, we've not necessarily come, with the right mindset. And I think, we kind of been thinking, oh, this is a lesser opposition, we'll just roll up. We've got Steph, we've got Jimmy, and we'll roll up and win the game. And that just hasn't been the case necessarily, and particularly defensively. I think there's a big difference between the Warriors when they're locked in defensively, when I think they can be one of, top 5 defense in the league. And then other times they're just a step slow on everything, and the other team can take advantage. And we've kind of seen that a few times recently, particularly against lesser teams where, as I said, you don't bring the right mindset. So it's good to see them do that today. The Spurs, did enter, I think they were, out of the All-Star break, they've been 11th in offensive rating. So they kind of have been dangerous. And that's what I thought. I was like, okay, if we don't come with that right mindset, then maybe they can put up enough points where this could be a troublesome game. But the Warriors were really, going from the outset. So it's good to see. And I also thought, looking at it, since the All-Star break, it might have gone down to 30th now, but they were 29th entering this game in defensive rating. And I thought to myself, well, that's a good opportunity, I suppose, to try and break out of this slump and get things firing again on all cylinders offensively. And that's exactly what we saw with 148 points. It feels like we're getting to that point of the season where you do see quite big scores being put up. We saw the Pacers the other day put up 162. That was wild scenes there. Logan says, needed this one. Piscando says, we should sign and trade Kuminga this offseason. He's not fit the Warriors system. He will thrive in another team, but doesn't fit in the system. Yeah. Look, I don't want to talk too much about Kuminga after, he wasn't really involved in this game. I want to try and talk about the positives. He was the one negative, I suppose, with the ankle injury. It looked initially like it was very similar to Steph's fall with his pelvic contusion against the Raptors. What are we going back to last Thursday kind of thing? It looked very similar to that. kind of got up. He thought, okay, maybe that's a pelvic buttock kind of injury. And then the Warriors stated that it's actually the ankle, the same ankle that he was obviously injured and out for 31 games with. He's once again kind of re-aggravated, which is disappointing and unfortunate, and maybe even worse than a pelvic contusion, because the last thing you want is this to be a lingering injury concern in terms of, that ankle repeatedly. We know Steph had ankle injuries at the start of his career and he fought through that. But, part of the ankle concerns were why the Warriors were able to get him on such a cheap contract, the 4-year, $44 million deal back in 2012, 2013, whenever it was. So, hopefully this doesn't become an ongoing concern for JK. And I thought he played pretty well on Friday against the Pelicans. 16 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. I thought he was one of the better players in the game. So that was a positive, and then not too much to be taken out of this game. Again, he only played 7 minutes before going down in that hard fall there in the second quarter. So I don't want to speak about him too much today. We've done it repeatedly over recent games, basically since his return from that long absence. There's going to be plenty of chatter about it in the offseason once the Warriors season ends, and we can look more forward to the offseason and potential transactions and roster moves and Kuminga's restricted free agency, which is going to be the biggest part of that, I think, from a Golden State perspective. Biscando also says, we should bring the sharpshooter forward from G League. He scored 44 points a couple of days ago. Yeah, that's Blake Hinson, who's been really balling out in the G League for the Warriors recently. I was surprised a little bit that they didn't go with him with the two-way contract that ended up going to Braxton Key, but Braxton Key's also been super impressive. I think there's a good chance he gets the final roster spot at the end of the season for the Warriors entering the playoffs. Doesn't mean he's going to have any impact in the playoffs, but just obviously have the extra body. Potentially someone, given his defensive excellence, like I know he's not on the roster, but you might say Braxton Key's a top 3-4 defender on this team. If he was, signed tomorrow, which again, he could be signed in the next couple of weeks here, pretty imminently. So maybe given that, like he's someone you could put in very specific, isolated, like defensive possessions, maybe. But then again, whether you kind of have his individual defensive ability in those scenarios over, okay, let's get the guys out there that have actually played together and have built the chemistry. Maybe you don't, but I think there is a good chance, regardless, that Braxton Key does get that final roster spot. I think Blake Hinton is certainly someone to watch over the offseason for a two-way contract. I'd be surprised if we didn't see him in Summer League with Golden State, and I'd be surprised if he wasn't either on a two-way contract or an Exhibit 10 contract heading into preseason. Obviously, plenty to play out between now and then, but he's been really impressive. Was someone that the Warriors snapped up pretty quickly after the Lakers waived him when he was on a two-way contract and played for them in Summer League last year. So, 44 points, a couple of big wins for Santa Cruz over the Rip City Remix. So good to see them make the playoffs. They'll have home court advantage first round against the Valley Suns starting in a couple of days here on April 1. So looking forward to that. Biscando also says Pods was excellent tonight. Yeah, one of his best games of his career, it must be said, because not only did he have the career high threes, the 27 points to lead the Warriors, but he also had 6 rebounds, 5 assists, did a little bit of everything. So a really nice performance from Brandin Podziemski, who, like, this goes to show you, I think the biggest thing with him still in terms of, future potential to me is the scoring. And I think he's trying, he's starting to really shake that narrative. Early in the season, it was like, okay, how's this guy going to be a star when, he can barely reach double-digit scoring? Because unless you're Draymond Green and you're arguably one of the best defensive players of all time, and certainly I think, probably the best defensive player of his generation, unless you're that, then it's very hard to be a quote-unquote star player by averaging like single-figure points, right? And that's what we saw from Pods early in the season. He was really struggling with his shot, really struggling with his scoring in general, finishing at the rim. Basically everything offensively from a scoring standpoint was a real struggle for him. And then you kind of thought to yourself, okay, so is this guy really going to have, star potential? And what we've seen, just looked at the numbers before. So in his first 25 games of the season, he had 2 games with 15 or more points, just 2 out of 25, right? And then since then, he's played 31 games. Obviously, he's had 2 different absences with some slight injury concerns. He's played 31 games since that first 25-game stretch, and he's got 14 games now with at least 15 points. So 15 points isn't a big mark, but I think in terms of a guy that does he have the future potential to average 15 plus points a game, maybe get that up close to 20? Obviously, he does a lot of other stuff as well, which is fantastic in terms of the rebounding and the playmaking and the secondary ball handling and the ability to take charges. So, you know, at the end of the day, like, he's so much more than just he's not a scorer necessarily, but still, like, you've got to be that 15 to 20 point guy to be, considered a star level player, so long as you bring all the other things. Like, obviously there's a lot of stars that average 25 plus. I'm not sure Pods is ever going to get to that, but it's been good to see, particularly shooting, 3-point shooting come around after that first 25 games. And even there's still some stuff. It's rare, but there is still some like isolation stuff with him, and there's some craftiness around the rim. Like, he had that one where he's kind of out in transition today, and then basically just pump faked and let the Cell or Castle or whoever it was just fly by and then finish the open layup. Like, he's got some craftiness, like that deceleration going to the rim, and ability to draw contact and get to the free throw line. Like, these are all parts of his game. Like, we've got to remember he's 22. He's still in his second year. There's still much improvement. And to see, again, those 14 games with at least 15 points out of the last 31, I think is a great sign for Brandin Podziemski. Thanek says, if we get the 5th seed, we get the Lakers. Yeah, that might not be necessarily the greatest thing, to be honest. So it's difficult because you also, like, you have to win Tuesday's game to make sure you remain in 6th. And that's the problem, is you don't necessarily want 5th. You don't necessarily even want 6th, to be honest, because then you could face the Nuggets. You'd actually rather finish 7th and play the Rockets, I think, in the first round. But at the same time, like, you don't want to be involved in the play-in tournament. You don't want to dare kind of get into a situation where, they're one-off games. You could have 2 bad games in a row and not even make the playoffs. So I think it's difficult, but at this point, like, you just got to keep winning, right? You just got to keep winning. And where you end up is kind of where you end up. And you also just want to build as much confidence, as much momentum as you can entering the playoffs as well. Like, you don't want to stutter here, and then maybe you do get into the 7th seed, and yes, you might be playing the Rockets, which you think is a favorable matchup, but maybe you're out of form, and that's, not necessarily going to lend itself to winning a first round playoff matchup against anybody. So we'll just wait and see what happens here. Piscano says, I'm not sure if I'd rather go up against the Lakers or Denver. I think I'd prefer... Biscando also says, I think both are bad matchups for us. I think I'd prefer... I don't know. I'm not sure either. Because I think... I don't know. I always look at Jokic as the best player in the world and just think to myself, it's like, how are we guarding that? Like, what are we doing? How are we possibly matching up with that? And that's certainly a point, but then I think there's another argument to suggest that maybe Denver are a little bit overrated as a result. Like, I think just what I think of Jokic individually maybe masks some of what I think about Denver. I just think at times that Jokic is that good that it makes Denver such an elite and very hard to stop team. And that is true in some cases, but maybe I think that too much. And maybe they actually are gettable. I could not believe that Minnesota beat them in the playoffs last season. Like, I was, until the final whistle actually blew, I was like, I cannot believe that just happened. Like, I know it got to a game 7, but even when it got to a game 7, I was just like, Denver are winning this. Like, there's no way Jokic is losing this series for Denver. And, he got tired. I remember watching that game. He started chucking a lot of threes up and missing a lot of them. And Minnesota just ran them out of the floor, ran them out of the floor in the second half. I don't know. I've had a big weekend. I had about, not that I should be beers, I reckon I had about 20 beers on Saturday. It's a big night. Went to the football with my cousin. It was a good weekend. I'm still recovering a little bit, though. I went for a 6-kilometer run this morning, and geez, it was a struggle. The next says, if we stay 6, I think I need the Rocks to lose a couple more games and go to 3rd. Yeah, ideally. But they look like they're going to beat Phoenix. I think they're blown. I was just watching that game. They're up 78-49 at halftime. Goodness me, that's a joke if you're the Suns. I'm just having a look at some numbers here. Dylan Brooks got ejected from that game. Some wild stuff going on in the NBA today. Not good for the Phoenix Suns. Anyway, someone here says Lakers over Denver. Possibly. Steve says, must-win game on Tuesday. Don't like that Curry's not playing Knox in non-blowout games. Would like to see a lineup with two bigs. Knox with TJD. The small ball is not going to work against the Lakers or Nuggets. I think it's too late in the season to be bringing back guys that haven't been part of the rotation for a long time. And so Knox has never really been part of the rotation. He's got spot minutes when he was on his two-way contracts here and there when the Warriors were facing a few injuries, but otherwise hasn't really been a part of it. So I don't think same with TJD. Like, a few games ago, we saw TJD get actually looked all right. And I thought, okay, maybe, but it hasn't gone back really to him since in non-blowout games. Obviously, those guys were able to play big minutes in the fourth today, but yeah, I think the rotation is pretty set. I think the starting lineup is now pretty much set with Steph, Pods, Moody, Butler, and Draymond. And then, you'll see 4 or 5 guys come off the bench. JK, Buddy. You're going to have Gee might play a bit. You're going to have GP2 there as well. And obviously Quentin Post is certainly a factor with his 3-point shooting. So that's probably the 10 guys. And then that might get whittled down to 8 or 9 as the playoffs come in. HS says, did you hear the giddy call Crocodile Dundee? I was watching that game the other day. Oh my, I was sitting on the couch by myself watching the game, and it was really weird because Reeves, I just couldn't believe the first part of it where they hit back-to-back threes to go in front. I was like, wow, what? Okay. All of a sudden, Chicago are in front. And then Reeves hits that layup, and I kind of just I think I just looked back at my laptop screen or I just tuned out of the game for a second and was like, okay, well, that's the game. And then Giddy hits that half court, and I was shocked. Legitimately shocked, just staring at the TV, thinking, did I just see that correctly? And then the Bulls caller was just going nuts. Melbourne, Sydney, Crocodile, just all these Australian references. And I don't even know what he was like. He was just babbling on, just talking crap, but I loved it. Josh has been good. Josh has been good recently. It's going to be interesting to see what he gets as restricted free agent in the offseason. Red Sox says, I think getting 5th and resting the boys and landing in 6th is the best. Yeah, because that's the other thing about the playing tournament. Not only do you obviously risk losing back-to-back games and getting eliminated entirely in the playing tournament, but you also have to just play, and you don't get that same rest than you would if you obviously had to finish as a top 6 seed. Steve says, I don't see us beating LA. Denver. Houston is our only hope. I wouldn't say I can see where you're coming from. I wouldn't say only hope is Houston. I'd go into a Nuggets or Lakers series. I think we'd definitely be outsiders, but I wouldn't say we're no hope of winning. Red Sox says LeBron re-energizes every time he plays Steph and throws off the game plan. Jokic is more of a known quantity. This is the problem with Denver is Jokic, and also they love to play against us. Yeah, that's the other thing. Jokic is obviously the big factor, and then the Nuggets' recent record. What have they won? 9 straight over the Warriors in the regular season. 9 straight since the first round of the 2022 playoffs. I don't know. That was the last time I went to that game. The last time the Warriors beat Denver, I went to that game 5 of the first round series in 2022. I was there at Chase Center. That was a good one to watch. It was a close game. We didn't actually play that well, but we closed it out. And obviously on the way to a championship, and we haven't beaten the Nuggets since. So quite disappointing, but it is what it is. And that does scare me a little bit heading into the playoffs. Even that game a couple of weeks ago now where no Jokic, no Murray, no Christian Brown, and the Nuggets somehow win. Aaron Gordon goes for 38 points, and the Warriors randomly lose that game by double digits. And I think that just goes to show you the kind of hold that the Nuggets have over the Warriors right now. I'm going to finish it up there, guys. It's been going for over 24 minutes. I don't think there's too much to be necessarily taken from this game, aside from it was a near perfect game. Aside from JK getting injured, great to see Pods and Moses regain their shooting stroke and find things offensively. That was great to see. Didn't really need too much out of Steph or Jimmy or Draymond. Those guys were all efficient, played well, but weren't, absolute necessarily required. And to get a blowout victory like that, it's been a while since the Warriors got a blowout win where basically we could just chill the second half and just watch the lads go through the motions, really. And, still, as I said, great to see Pods and Moody, particularly in that third quarter, get going. Hopefully find some confidence for what's going to be a huge game on Tuesday against the Grizzlies. Looking forward to that one. I'm sure there'll be plenty more topics of discussion following that. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that'd be greatly appreciated. And follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Thank you to everyone that has commented. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in on the replay or via your podcast feed. Much appreciate the ongoing support. Had my one game off against the Pelicans on Friday, but I'll be back for post-game lives after every game for the rest of the season. Basically, don't plan on taking any off unless something comes up that is unforeseen. I'll be back doing post-game lives after every Warrior game for the rest of the season, through the regular season, and then entering the playoffs. Hopefully, the Warriors can secure a playoff seeding of sorts, and ideally not through the play-in tournament. But as people keep saying, finishing 7th might not be the worst, and potentially playing the Rockets rather than the Lakers or the Nuggets in the first round. If you're still in America, it's Sunday night PT time now. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hope to see you guys after the game against Tuesday, the